So welcome back, everybody. Welcome if you're just joining us in the Leadership Lounge over here. Just start each top of the hour just with a couple, just how to use the site. Just to make sure everybody's using it, because we did put a lot of work into it to try and make it friendly and help everybody network with each other and grow your PLNs. I'm going to start with thanking our sponsors, of course.
Getting your ride in? Getting your ride in?
I'm going to mute people. Okay. So I want to thank Catch On, Classcraft, Phyall, Global Teletherapy, Grade Cam, and Sanford Programs. Some new folks with us too for joining us this conference, so we're thrilled to have them. Just wanted to quickly talk about how the hub works. And I know some of you heard this already, but just want to make sure everybody's clear on it. So when you're in the hub, after you're logged on, you're into the hub, you can visit a sponsor booth. When you go to, you just navigate to the home page of the conference hub, go to the sponsor booth, and in there you can do a live chat, you can book meetings, and you can enter for fabulous prizes. There's a button on there that says Passport to Prizes. So anyone who's done our in-person events know we love to hand out prizes at the end of a conference. So each time you click on that, you can submit a raffle ticket, and we'll do a drawing at the end of the conference, and we'll send out the winner announcement by email. You can find your personalized agenda. So if you wanted to make any changes to your agenda during the day, totally fine. Just go on to your My Agenda, and it says modify sessions, and then you'll go in, and if there's anything you want to switch sessions, you just uncheck what you have selected already and then check what you would like to choose and save it, and that should work just fine. The only caveat is some of the sessions are sold out. So if you aren't able to select it, just means that that one is sold out. We have over 1,200 people registered for this conference, which is amazing, and thank you to all our partners for helping to fill the room here today. For this session, we've got two fabulous presenters. We have Adam Phyall from Director of Technology and Media Services at Newton County School System in Georgia, and Todd Dugan, Superintendent of Bunker Hill, CUSD number 8 in Illinois. So they're going to tell us a little bit about what they're doing, and then I'm going to be monitoring the chat, and so we really want this to be a conversation. So Todd and Adam are going to kick off the conversation with some ideas, but really hoping that we can hear from everybody. So please add questions, comments, ideas in the chat, and then we'll make sure we have plenty of time for not just Q&A, but idea sharing as well. So I will kick it off with Adam.
Oh, thank you, Christine. First off, thank you everybody for taking part of this. I wanted to say my disclaimer, I am not an expert on digital equity. I just stated a Holiday Inn Express. No, but seriously, like the biggest thing about digital equity, I want everyone to kind of get, you don't have to be an expert on it to care about it and to do something about it. That's the biggest thing, just really being aware and taking action on it. But as stated, Adam Phyall, Director of Technology and Media Services for Newton County School System in Covington, Georgia. Todd?
And I am Todd Dugan, Superintendent at Bunker Hill School District number 8 in Bunker Hill, which is in South Central rural part of Illinois. I'd like to echo what Adam said. You don't have to be an expert in digital equity. My passion has been equity, period. And so when you compare digital equity to equity, it's the same discussion, just with different details. So I'm glad to be joining Adam today. I've seen him a few times at Tech and Learning events in the past, and I think you're in for a great presentation.
Okay, the bar has been set. Hopefully I can at least see it to try to get to it. We're going to kind of get going. And as was stated earlier, we really want this to be a natural conversation as we start talking about digital equity in our spaces and just questions and things to consider moving forward in your particular spaces. So definitely, feel free to participate. This is definitely not a sit and get, even though we're all sitting. Hopefully everybody is going to be getting something from everybody in our conversation.
Yep, and I'll echo that too. We are all sitting. Actually, some of us shorter people are sitting on top of our board policy manuals to make myself look at even height. So this first one, the slide on it's a poll about the digital divide. So this one, if you're familiar with Zoom, you can do the reaction emojis. So I guess when we go through some of these questions, you know, react with an emoji, whether the thumbs up or the applaud. So what, you know, basically, do you have 100% of your students that have access to the internet? You know, what, you know, like, do you basically, that would be a thumbs up, thumbs down question is, are all of your students have internet access? How about every student with access to devices? All right, seeing some emojis. How about, more importantly, access to high quality online instruction occurring synchronously and asynchronously? All students with opportunities to take risks and practice creativity? And finally, all students receiving instruction from a teacher who is highly engaging online. So that was kind of a icebreaker type poll, because if you answered yes to all of these, you probably should not have signed up for a conference breakout session on digital equity. So since you're here, we're assuming that maybe some of these are areas to brainstorm ideas on which we can get better. I think both Adam and I, the avenue that we're going to take is not one, we'll share like how we started. Adam's from a much larger district. I'm from a small rural one. We're going to share some of our little steps and then just let you guys take it over from there to guide for the future. So Adam?
All right. And so just really quick, you know, with equity, you know, when you think about equity, it's ultimately going to make sure that you are doing what's best for your students. And that's why I said earlier, you don't have to be an expert on it. You just have to care about it and want to do something about it. The first thing is, you know, we're realizing that there is inequity in our school system. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that you have it. It's a bad thing if you don't recognize it. And so that's the thing that, you know, as you are going down this path, you have to be aware of it and you have to recognize it. And I'm gonna talk about this a little bit later, but on those poll questions, you have to be honest with yourself when you're answering those poll questions, because I know sometimes in school systems, we have the tendency to have our public facing honesty and our internal honesty. And so you want to make sure that you're just being overall honest with yourself and where you stand with equity in your spaces. Because I know some of us have probably had situations where, even before the COVID situation, where your students had to go to public internet access, such as at a McDonald's or at a Starbucks, if you're even lucky enough to have those in your communities. Wouldn't you agree, Todd?
I totally agree. And especially now, like, these are just headlines and these are before COVID. These were before COVID-19. So these are just 3 random headlines, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, web deprived that are studying at McDonald's. McDonald's is now, for the most part, closed on the inside. So even that is now not an option. But, and expanding further on what Adam had said about equity, I would agree with that 1,000%. Honesty is needed. And when you look at your equity, both digital and otherwise, this is not a one-time deal. Like, you correct your equity and we're done. Like, you don't go, you know, like certain things you do every year, like principals go through every April or so, March, April, and they say, okay, we're going to revise our student handbooks for next year so we can get them to the board for a first reading and then an adoption a year later. That's just routine. And then you do it and you're done. Equity is not like that. You don't, you know, every August, like, okay, we got to go through these policies and now every kid has the same device. So yes, equity, check, done. Equity is continuous. And even if you could answer yes to all of those previous poll questions, even if you can answer all those, there is still more work to be done in order to achieve true equity.
All right, so as we mentioned, you know, we are from different districts. My system is in Georgia. I am representing the proud state of Georgia. We were one of the first states to open back up for tattoos, bowling, and all those essential things. So as soon as it opened up, I went and got my tattoo and went bowling, because that's what we do as Georgians. but seriously, my district, we service 24 schools. It's 20,000 students approximately. And you see our demographics as far as the makeup of Black, white, and Hispanic and multiracial students, how they identify. 4% of our students, we ELL and 86 different languages, and which was something that a lot of people don't really realize. Of course, in Georgia, that there's so many different languages that are spoken in our district. And oh, I forgot to mention also Newton County. For those of you who don't know, we're also known as the Hollywood of the South. So it's more than likely movie or TV show you watch was probably filmed here. But unfortunately, we really don't get any of that money because we have 68% of our students unfortunately qualify for free and reduced lunch programs. So what that boils down to is 22 of our 24 sites qualify for Title I services. And with our district, we're kind of a, you know, if you want to call it a suburb-ish of Atlanta. So we have urban population, we have a suburban population, and we also have a rural population within our district. So that brings a unique set of challenges or opportunities within our district with some of our students that are more of the urban metro section and our suburban and our rural. So we have areas that are highly connected, and we have areas that there's no connectivity, even when you're talking about cell phones or getting mobile hotspots. Even when we talk about the poverty, and for those of you who have done work in poverty, you know that there's a difference between your urban poverty, suburban poverty, and rural poverty. Because some of these, even when you start talking about generational poverty in those various areas, there's different nuances that you have to consider when the family structure, when you're working with these families. So we have a very diverse population here, and we have needs that stretch the gambit within our district.
Okay, and so the opposite end of the spectrum, Bunker Hills District number 8 is 2 schools, 600 students pre-K through 12. We're remote rural in South Central Illinois. 18% of our families have no reliable broadband internet access. And being from Illinois, it's just funny that Adam and I are partnered together on this. We are one of the last states to open. In fact, today is the very first day where outdoor restaurants and stuff like that. In fact, you can't tell, I haven't had a haircut forever. So while Georgia was the first to open up, Illinois is the last to open up. And similar, the clientele of our school district, as opposed to Adams, while there's many, many similarities as far as like poverty level, yes, we have a lot of families without access to reliable internet access, even mobile hotspots due to lack of cell phone coverage. And Adam had also mentioned the very difference between urban poverty and rural poverty. One of the problems with rural poverty is there is the lack of proximity to resources. So whereas in many urban settings, there are like the McDonald's hotspots. When there are no McDonald's in town, what do you do? So just a quick overview of where our district is in relation to Adams.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you brought up. You know, when you start talking about the how close the proximity you are to various free internet access, that becomes a problem. I mean, I know during this COVID situation, you had internet service providers that were providing open internet access. I know Xfinity, I think Spectrum provided that as well. And I know a few other providers also. But if you aren't in close proximity to someone, it didn't help. So, you know, those are those things that are larger issues when we're talking about this whole digital equity. It's if you are, I hate to say it, in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter how much free internet is out there. If you can't access it, then you are cut off from the rest of the world.
Correct. And I can tell you a little bit about that struggle too in a couple of slides when we get to some hotspots too. I can attest to that and give some unique challenges and also some unique ways of addressing. And then I'd love to hear your ideas too as participants on what you guys have done. So in that chat, I think Christine just posted a starter question, and we've got more questions to follow.
Yeah, like seriously, y'all, ask questions.
Yes.
Because and the thing is, if we don't have the answers, the smartest people are going to be all of us. And so definitely ask those questions, because this is one thing that I love about this pandemic. And there's not a lot to love, but one of the things is for the first time in a long time, this has been one common problem that we are facing as a country, and it's allowing, for example, this virtual conference, for like-minded individuals to get together and work in solving these problems. Because even though our demographics are slightly different and he's a smaller district than mine, we are still facing the exact problems. Who is part of this session? So definitely ask questions, share, because we're smarter together. Definitely.
Yes, I totally agree. And the best part, I always feel the best part of a conference is the networking among each other. So not the presentation itself. As dynamic as Adam and I are going to be, you want to connect with each other. So even so, I guess I can start off. I just want 5 minutes, just the backstory, maybe 3 minutes of Bunker Hill prior to COVID-19 and leading up to some of this, and then love to chime in with some ideas or corrections, even like, hey, we know of a better way. We had that same issue. We did it better. Share it. So we were basically Bunker Hill. We were small rural. We were taking our time to go one-to-one. We did not want to be one of the districts in the area that did a mass deployment of 800 devices and then said, oh, look at us, we're one-to-one. But basically you still have the equity gap, only you have an equity gap with connected kids. So we were working one-to-one slowly in grades 4th, 5th, 6th, and 9th. Seems like a weird span, but that's where we intentionally started in the middle, and we're trying to work up and down throughout the years. Obviously, we never got to that point before COVID struck. So one of the things that is anybody that's been through a one-to-one conversion before knows, most importantly is you have to transform the pedagogy prior to the device deployment. You don't give the devices and then say, okay, transform your teaching, because otherwise it's disruptive, but that's not sustainable. And so one of our struggles that we were working on addressing over long term was rural outlying areas with no broadband provider, limited cell phone coverage. And going back to the whole heart of equity, you can give every kid a device, but if you have certain kids that are getting kill and drill programs, and you've got certain kids that are able to create cool things and not just consume videos, but to actually create experiences, that's not equity. You basically, if nothing changes, you've actually exacerbated your equity gap, but you've just done it with devices. And so even prior to COVID, this headline right here, I have this article printed, I read it from time to time, and it was talking about how schools push for tech in every classroom, and now parents are pushing back because they were not seeing the results. And I would say it's not the technology is not to blame. It is not because they chose iPads instead of Chromebooks. Well, if they would have chose Chromebooks, it would have been better. But it was the lack of transforming your teaching, which is at the heart of any one-to-one conversion.
And Todd, if I can chime in on that, because here's one of the things, it's really interesting how the conversation has changed around technology and what we're doing with students. Because right before COVID, there was a groundswell, if you will, in some places of screen time. I mean, that was something that you were hearing a lot about, even to the tune of like Apple and other providers putting various screen time programs in their operating system. And I think screen time was one of those first world problems. Because you're in a situation where like, oh my gosh, my kid's spending too much time on screens, when in some cases students didn't even have the screens to have to worry about the time.
Correct.
So it was one of those first world problems.
And another one too is what does that screen time look like? Are you spending hours and hours watching mind-numbing videos of people squishing slow rising squishies, or are you actually contributing and making your own little miniature videos and uploading your own thumbnails that you've created based on things that you have figured out on your own problem solving? So yes, I totally agree. There was that debate on screen time, still a very legitimate debate. But we're trying to redirect the conversation also as there's good screen time and there's bad screen time. Good screen time is active and engaging. It's two-way. You have not just a simple consumption of information. Otherwise, it would be like no different than just vegetating in front of a television.
Yeah, and I think in my district, I know we got kind of caught, of course, in the process. We were similar to yours, actually, in working in a phasing process with the one-to-one. It kind of goes back to having the resources. Of course, this is not a cheap process to get enough devices for kids and to, of course, maintain the fleet. So we were looking at a phasing in process. And so, and with that being said, for trying to work on the pedagogy while it was happening, because I often tell folks, if you don't know why, don't buy. And so, but we ended up, in some cases, buying the devices. And so you have parents ask, why one-to-one too? Because we need one-to-one. Well, why? Why do we need one-to-one? Does the curriculum support it? Are we teaching around the importance of having this technology component to complete tasks, as you mentioned, to create? What is the purpose of the devices? So even when we start talking about digital equity, and I'm gonna talk about it a little bit later, does it really mean giving every kid a device ultimately in this conversation? Or is it more focused on what the kids are doing when they have those devices?
Correct. Okay, so one thing was there was e-learning and then there was remote learning. If you did not have one-to-one deployed successfully, then a lot of school districts like ours were focused on more of a hybrid. We rapidly got some additional devices out to our students that already had at least some exposure and teachers with some training, some Chromebooks, Windows 10 laptops. However, for a vast majority of lower elementary students, it was printed packets. Here's where I am going to really stress what Adam had mentioned about equity not meaning the devices. So one of the things that we stressed in our district, and very, very proud of our district in that regard, was we stressed that if a student is unconnected and requests a printed packet, we insisted that it must be identical to the online Google Classroom. For example, and we made this example several times, it is not equity if you upload a very cool, engaging Khan's Academy video for science class, and for the unconnected student, you gave them a packet of busy work, such as word searches or vocab words, lower levels. So we insisted as a district that, yes, printed packets is not necessarily a bad thing, unless, considering these parameters. And so this also helped with, we had several students in several grades that were actually in one of our one-to-one bands across the district, and parents would intentionally say, I would like to request a printed packet because my kid has too much screen time. So very, very real concern among parents.
Yeah, and one of the things that I see with the device handout, I mean, of course, this is one of those things that a lot of us were not prepared for. So we were running around trying to figure out the best deployment models. I know when we deployed our devices, it was doing our shelter in place. So we were trying to make sure that we weren't even violating the law, asking parents to come out and collect and pick up devices and having my team deploy the devices. And so it was one of those where it worked out for us, where of course it was not in violation of the law that was out. But really wanting to make it as easy for our parents to be aware and connected in this whole equity aspect. We did things such as made sure that we had a phone line available. So when we had the request, we did a Survey Monkey, and we also had paper copies of the form to request a device that was available at our breakfast and lunch pickups. And then we also had a phone line that a parent could call. We had an email address and a phone line, so they could email and say, yes, I would need a device, and then we would communicate via email, or they could call. We manned the phones between like 8 and 5, and then we returned any messages that were left that next morning, because we really wanted to make sure that they had enough opportunity, because if they didn't have a device, how could they fill out an online form? If they did not have transportation to pick up the food, then they were running into another situation. So we did our school messenger phone blast to let them know, hey, here's the phone number. Here are the different ways that you can access us so we can support you. Because you have to think about, your community and where they are so you can reach them better.
Yeah, and I wonder, maybe we could jump in. I see some great questions coming in. Would it be right to pause and maybe So again, not to call her anybody, but it's kind of what I'm doing. Ann Truger, hi Ann. I see you putting some really good comments in, and I know Adam, we've discussed this before about the issue of looking at digital equity, not just for students, but also for teachers and parents and support staff, and also not making assumptions about the technical skills for all of them. So would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about like what you're doing, or even just some of those questions, and maybe, you know, Todd, Adam, and the rest of the folks on here could chime in?
So, I know for us, we weren't even, we forgot actually about the support staff and teachers with the equity piece, going back to those areas, the urban, suburban, rural poverty. Sad to say, we don't pay our teachers enough. And so some of our teachers did not have internet at home. They didn't have, or they had internet and they didn't have a high-speed plan. They had some of the lower plans. So when we started talking about all this Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, they said they didn't have the bandwidth to host some of that stuff. So when we started handing out Kajeeps and hotspots, we had to also hand some of these out to our staff members to be able to support what we were asking them to do. So that was something that we dropped the ball on in this conversation.
Yep.
And can we let Ann just jump in real quick? And then, yes, I just wanted to hear, since she unmuted there.
No worries. So I started with a new school district in January, and I'm an applications trainer. And one of the things that happened with us was there was a lot of focus on what the teachers needed and the students needed, but we have a lot of paraprofessionals, a lot of mentors, we have all our support staff, and I felt like we did a great job like getting stuff out to kids who wanted it. Like we are a one-to-one Chromebook, but the Chromebooks are not necessarily being used in every class. So then they disappear and things happen. So one of the things we're working on is changing to more of a digital instruction and innovation. So we're like right in the middle of starting that turn when all of this happened. And the one thing that we've gotten loud and clear from our staff is that our parapros have to have the same types of tools our teachers do, because they're like the first line of defense with some of our kiddos to, you know, be able to make those connections, and they don't have the same ability. We also made a lot of assumptions about what teachers were able to do or knew how to do and what students knew how to do. And we've been working on a strategic plan right now, and one of the things we're really focusing on is looking at the assumptions we made and what we need to do differently come the fall, because we were hit unaware. You know, we were kind of knowing something was coming, but we had no idea what it was going to be. And so we had made all these assumptions like, okay, this will be fine, no worries. But then as we started to dig in, I mean, there were teachers who didn't know how to use Google Classroom, and that was the tool the district had decided on like the week before we went out. They said, okay, we all have to have Google Classroom. So it really, looking at those assumptions, I think, is a big part of digital equity. And I believe that students are extremely important, but if the teachers can't get to the students, there's that piece as well, including support and parapros.
Absolutely. And then Anthony had a question here. So how are you supporting your users and parents for technical issues? So that's a huge question. So anybody want to jump in, or Todd or Adam, if you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We've pushed out like a tech support ticket system, but unfortunately that's like most, it's where you have to be at the actual domain of the district. So we had to basically convert our tech support click button into a website, and we had pushed that out to kids too. Kids that would say, I can't get my Chromebook to respond with this, or, you know, my trackpad's not responding. So we would do that too. Now, as far as staff, one of the things we quickly saw too were lacking of a device at home powerful enough to run like Zoom, along with all of these other teachers were trying to a few teachers were trying to do like PBL lessons, which were very, very good. very good, very interdisciplinary. However, they quickly realized that by, uploading Google Classroom and running the software and the PBL, and then also keeping grades and files, their devices were not performing like they should. So that was one thing to support staff, is that we quickly deployed and addressed. So I guess that's the big piece too on the assumptions. You can look at the assumptions and you have to double check on if those assumptions are correct or what needs modified. But then just looking at the assumptions isn't enough. I think you have to address like whether they were right or wrong. And so we just, it's easy for tech-oriented people like admin, Christine, and myself to say, yeah, just work from home, not a big deal, because we know the ins and outs and we probably have a decent, but when there are these other assumptions, it's not just enough to be aware of it, but then to address it and such. Some of the things that we did too, like same with Adam, we had deployed the Sprint hotspots to some of our teachers. We had teachers that were literally parked in front of the high school, sitting on their laptop in their vehicle, trying to conduct meetings with students. So that was huge. Better devices, more internet for staff members.
Yeah, and I see Leon here has a cool idea when he said he had a large pool of paraprofessionals who were displaced. Utilizing that group gave them some basic training and used them to help with, sort of the triage of technical issues. That was a great idea. Adam, I'm sorry, do you want to chime in with?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one thing that we did, of course, we had our phone support that we did, because let's be honest, I'm a technical person. I do the email thing after a while with support, but get me on the phone with somebody, because I need to talk to somebody to talk through this. So that's how I am. So I knew that so there are probably some people out there like me who want to actually talk to a live person. So we actually had an 8 to 5 phone line. We had like a rolling phone system. So we had 3 people manning that during the day. People could leave their questions and they report back, call them back. For parents, we had with our ticket system, they could email our tech support and it would roll into a ticket system, and my technicians, and similar to Leon, we have our school technologies assistants, which are pretty much like a paraprofessional position. They were kind of grabbing those tickets and answering those. And we also utilize Splashtop to remote access user computers to kind of walk them through what was going on their screen as well. So we really tried to provide a lot of support, and it really turned into almost a 24/7 support. I hate to call it that because we weren't answering them all the time, but my staff members, they have a rock star team. I'm sure Todd has the same thing as well. They were answering tickets at 11, 12, 2 in the morning. They would see them pop up and answering those questions. So they were really trying to provide support as soon as they came in to the parents, because going back to the equity piece, we had some of our parents who were essential workers. So we think about work during an 8 to 5 day, but they may have been working at the grocery store during that 8 to 5 day or at the hospital. And so they were helping their kids with their assignments after our traditional work hours. So we had to modify how we provided the support to make sure we were supporting after our traditional work hours, because that's when they needed that's when they had those questions, and that's when they needed the support.
Yep. And that was another area of assumptions too, when working with, there were several families in our district with essential workers where the oldest child at home was responsible for childcare arrangements due to school closure, daycare closures. And so this assumption of students that had not been completing work or checking in with teachers, assuming that a student is disengaged or uninterested, not necessarily the case. The assumption is that, but the reality was that there were, the family was in crisis mode. Maybe mom and dad were both bartenders or, completely out of work. And yes, spelling words online would be the very last of their worries.
Yeah. And I see a question from Kate, and a very good one, concerned about just burning people out with this sort of 24/7. I mean, Adam, you said you have a schedule, but the bandwidth, the bandwidth is the same, but the demand is so much higher. So that's a big issue, I would think. And I don't know, Leon, if you put some good ideas in here, if you'd like to share them with us too. Again,
Yeah, come on, Leon.
Yeah, love to hear from you. But if you're Not able to, that's okay too.
Leon.
All right. And
Don't
also,
worry, there is pressure, Leon.
yeah, no worries. And then I know sometimes Zoom doesn't always play nicely with everybody's technology. But yeah, Todd, I know you had one more thing to talk about did you want to talk about that homework?
Sure.
The homework
Sure.
hotspots, I think
Yep.
that's a cool
And
idea.
then, and speaking to that, when we talked about like the family situations being unique, that's where I think we saw the natural organic evolution from synchronous to asynchronous, because, you've got teenagers that are sleeping until 11 or 12 or later, and they're doing good work. It's just not from 7:55 to 11. So this is just one. We had talked about how having a lack of access. I was actually last year was asked to moderate an ISTE EdTech coach Twitter chat on digital equity, and it was set for March of 2020. This was like last fall, like maybe September. And so this was set in the books a long time ago. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm moderating a Twitter chat on digital equity. So one of the things that we had done was we had, in some of the questions, we had said 18% of our students, it's a huge homework gap. And so we tagged like Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and our local, very local telecommunications company, Madison Communications. We tagged them all on Twitter. And then the next day I actually got a phone call from the CEO of this local telecommunications, pretty upset that I had tagged them on Twitter. But at the end of the call, turned very nice. After 20 minutes, they had provided a free homework hotspot for our kids. So basically, it was such a simple solution. Is it perfect? No. Am I proud of it? Yeah, considering that we had like a week to get it up. But this shows you right here why the synchronous learning was impossible, because you got so basically we just did an outside access point. The telecommunications company gave us free 1 gig of service. So we cranked it up, took the password off, left the filtering in place, put out flyers all over, posted on websites, social media, said, hey, here's some homework hotspots, 2 of them in town. Select this network, no password required. Obviously maintain social distancing, no congregating. And then you've got a family there. There's actually 3 of them in that picture. The parent is actually using a device to do work, and you've got 2 kids in the back seat completing homework. And those 2 kids, by the way, were sharing a device. So there was no way possible to do this. Science class meets from 8 to 9 every day, Monday through Friday. We have to log into Zoom from 8 to 9 for science. That quickly became, while you start off thinking that's the way it's going to be, this is the organic evolution. So I will also say, because I think we've got some good questions too to feed this discussion later, but I would like to echo what Adam said. There's not a lot to love about COVID-19, but that's one thing too, is this whole, finally the recognition that, school does, learning does not have to happen in the walls of the science classroom or the math classroom or the English classroom. It can happen everywhere, and it can be interdisciplinary, connected, and real world related.
Yeah, and I saw a question come in from Sarah Ewing, and I'm sure many districts are in this situation where they actually have both urban and rural poverty in their district. She says that they have more solutions for the urban areas. Curious about the rural areas. Sarah, Todd is in an extremely rural area. I'm not sure if those ideas help, or if you have other questions or anything you want to share.
Yeah. This doesn't address the transportation issue if you're out in an outlying area. However, it is better than driving over an hour to a metropolitan area, especially when you're under a statewide stay-at-home order.
Yeah. So Sarah, if you want to elaborate on that or chime in, Adam.
Yeah, the only thing that we were really able to do with the time crunch was open up our guest network outside of our schools. And so for our rural students, ultimately, the closest thing they were to of substance was our schools. And so we did have families that were able to, of course, stay in their vehicles, come up to our schools and utilize our network. But, and I'm curious to see if someone has some better solutions. I mean, the one thing that I know we have done is started those conversations with our internet service providers, with our utilities, our local utilities, about, dark fiber, trying to broker that conversation. And I know I am talking to my school board to try to talk to our county as far as having those conversations, because it has to be, it's not a school system problem. This is it's a state problem, it's a county problem, it's a national problem. So it has to be something that we get our politicians involved in. And this is my hope, not to make this conversation go political, but this should be something that's discussed in our November elections, as far as what are we going to do for our infrastructure for internet access for all of American citizens. And so I challenge each of you to speak to your representatives, your senators, your Congress, let your voices heard. This is something that really needs to be looked at as a utility. Everyone should have some level of connectivity. It should work just like your mailbox, because now going to the doctor today requires internet access, whether it's to do an online appointment or to get your results back from your blood test. They come to your mobile device or to your email. So all those things are requiring internet access. So we have to make sure people have access to it.
Yes, 100%. This is the equity gap that some of us have seen, this equity gap for years. Christine, I've seen this for like 8 years, like this digital divide. But then when this happened, then it just gets bubbled up like, it's always been there, but this one just, this scenario just brought it bubbling up to where people are like taking notice, like, yes, this is not good. But we've been saying it all along. It's not just for homework. Like if you want to apply for a job, you have to do an online application 99% of the time. So like, 1930s, it was the Tennessee Valley Authority that said electricity for all. 2020 needs to be internet for all, Wi-Fi for all.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we only have a couple minutes left, but I kind of related to that, Adam, thank you for bringing that up. Shannon asked about, there's a lot of free services happening now, and, any insight into, once we get past this sort of emergency time, what that might look like. And I don't know if any of you are maybe working in partnership with your local providers or kind of getting some advocacy around that. Anybody want to hop in on any thoughts on that?
I know, definitely check out the, and as Cheryl, thank you for adding that in there. The FCC is really who we need to be communicating with. I know COSIN is taking a major role in this. Also, Future Ready is definitely taking a leading role in that. And, definitely look at if you're a member of your local COSIN groups, it's power in numbers. And so that's definitely one of those things we need to keep in mind. But, as we mentioned, use your voice at the FCC. They listen. That's their job. Absolutely.
I'd echo that. In addition to your local COSIN chapter, your state ISD affiliate, like in Illinois, obviously it's IDEA. And that's an excellent resource too, right, Amber?
Yeah, and if anybody has resources that they want to share, we do have that hub on the conference hub. So you can send them to me by email, christine.weiser@futurenet.com, and I'll make sure that they get added. But we are out of time, and I thank you to Adam and to Todd and to everybody else who joined this conversation. I feel like this could be a whole conference unto itself, obviously, but we'll be doing variations of this conference for the rest of the day, of this conversation rather, in the Leadership Lounge and elsewhere. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your time, get a stretch for 15 minutes, and thanks for everything. Have a great day, and don't forget to tweet TL Tech Live. Thank you.
Yep. And follow Adam and I on Twitter.
And follow Adam and Todd. Did you put your slide?
Yeah, we had it on the slide or something.
Get your slide up there. Get your slide up there. There you go. Yes, follow them on Twitter.
Yep.
I'm gonna screen grab it and tweet it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Bye, Adam. Bye, Christine.
All right. Thanks, everybody.